What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Hand Tight Racing YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little different, but I think it'll be helpful for a lot of people, a lot of BC customers. Abby's 350Z is still separate spring and shock in the rear, and we need to get it ready to drift because she has a private day on October 8th, so we need to get that thing dialed in to where the tire wear is even and everything. So we're going to be doing two things to it today. First, we're going to convert the rear from separate spring and shock to true coilover so that we can remove the tow arm and get tow adjustment, and then put all ISR arms on it in the rear. So in the middle of that, I'm going to teach some BC customers how to properly do the separate spring and shock conversion on their 350Z slash G35, G37. It's a little different spec parts, but it's all the same concept. So let me show you what we got. So in order to complete the conversion the proper way, these are the parts that you're going to need. So we got two dampers. The difference is these have a 14mm shaft as opposed to the separate spring and shock's 12mm shaft. So we need two of these. Then we need two lower spring seat lock rings, two middle lock rings. We don't need the lower lock ring because we'll be reusing that from the previous damper. It's the same size with the same taper, so that can be reused, as well as the lower mount and the upper mount. Then we have two plastic spring seat isolators. These are going to be for the bottom. We'll take the ones off the height adjusters for the top. And then we have these special washers. As you can see, they're kind of tapered inside. For the C-clip that's located on these dampers, this goes like this onto the damper, and the upper mount sits on this. The separate spring and shock one does not come equipped with that. And then we've got two springs. So all in all here, I think this was somewhere around the ballpark of like 300 bucks. You can hit me up for these, or just go on the BC website directly, hit up our chat feature, whatever. But this is pretty much all you need to get this done, BC wise. So our first order of business is to get this thing up in the air and get the wheels off. I've actually never worked on a 350Z like this, so this really confused me. I was like, how the f am I supposed to get to these upper mounts? So I pulled this panel off and realized that that's not the way it works. I guess there's some studs that come up down there with the nut, so I was confused for a second, but got it figured out. All right, as you can see here, this one still has the V-barrel design. There is another design with a gold spacer type deal that goes on the bottom of the spring that makes this a linear spring. As you can see, this one tapers. It's got a smaller inner diameter here, larger inner diameter there. You can see that by these numbers on the spring. 62, that's this inner diameter. 97, that's this inner diameter. 210, that's the length of the spring. 8 kg. So our next order of business is to unbolt this shock, get the preload off that spring, get the spring out of there, get the shock out of there, and then we'll start disassembling this shock so that we can complete our true rear conversion. One shock unbolted, but this thing has dampening extensions, so we need to take the knob off that so we can drop this thing out. As you know, these 350Zs are kind of tight. All right, so we've got both shocks out. Our next order of business is to get these springs out, and I'm gonna try to do it by myself, but you kind of got to push the control arm down and grab the spring, so I don't know if I'll have enough leverage. We got a lot going on here today too. As you can see, there's just a random bed there. It goes to that truck, which is getting a bunch of work done. The air system's being redone. Tim's doing that. That's his specialty. So he's over here cutting it up, getting it ready. We got our shocks out. We'll be reusing the lower mount, the lock ring, dust boot bump stop, upper mount top nut, and this washer here, which doesn't look like it was installed properly in the first place. As you can see, the big gap there. So we'll get that all taken care of. And yeah, I'm gonna get these springs out, and then I'm gonna probably remove the spring bucket first, and then figure out how I want to do this. I'm not sure yet. I got a better idea. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take the spring bucket off because we're doing that anyways. I'm don't know why I'm sitting here fighting it. I got me a wobble extension. Hopefully that'll give me the right. There we go, we're on there. And then take this adjustable, put it on the back side here. Alright, so after just a little bit of a fight, we got the height adjuster and the spring out. So now it's just our spring bucket. And then we're going to go work on the other side, get that one out, and then we'll remove these two spring bucket arms. Before we finish the spring bucket removal and the arms, we'll probably walk through the actual assembling the BC coilovers to make them true rear. I think that's our best order of business for now. So the first thing we're going to do here is remove our dampening extensions with a 2mm Allen key. You just have to loosen the set screw, and these pretty much slide right off. Super simple. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is find a 14mm wrench that is skinny as possible to leave room between the top nut and the adjustment knob. Loosen your adjustment knob and then set those to the side. Once you've got your dampening knob off, you'll grab an impact and a 17mm socket. You'll start to remove the 17mm top nut that holds the upper mount down. Sometimes the piston shaft will start to spin when you hit it with the impact, but no worries, just grab it with your hand, use the impact again. That will stop the piston shaft from moving. You can pull your top nut off and set your upper mounts to the side. And moving on from the upper mounts, we're going to start working on the lower mount lock ring. Typically what we do at BC and what I do is we'll grab the small spanner wrench, put it on that lock ring, and then just give it a few taps in the correct direction. Usually it will come loose. Once that's done, you can start working your lower mount off. I usually go back and forward, especially if they're old, because there's debris and dirt and everything else in there. Sometimes if they're being real stubborn, I'll go grab some penetrating oil like WD-40, PB Blaster, even ATF works, anything that's penetrating. And then I'll basically take them all the way off until they start to get really tight, where they won't move anymore, and then I'll work it back the other way, just trying to clean those threads out, periodically flipping the damper over to try and drop any dirt that may be in there, and just kind of working it off. This one is being ridiculously stubborn, so it took me a while, but with enough patience and enough effort, I was able to save this lower mount, which also saved us $50 because we don't have to buy another one. If in the case it does start to get tight on you, definitely try and work it back the other way. Don't just try to force it, because you will seize this lower mount, and then this damper and that lower mount are no longer any good. As you can see, I struggled with that one for quite some time, so I had a better idea. I just hold the damper and lower mount on the table, put a screwdriver through the lower mount, and work it back that way. Alright, so after earning our lower mounts the hard way, because these are from 2016, I just found out, so they were kind of not wanting to come off, all the dirt built up and everything in there. So we just had to work them back and forward, and eventually we got them off. So these are basically all the parts you need to reuse from your old suspension. I forgot we got to get these off and then get our dust boot and bump stop off, because we got to reuse these too. There should be a bump stop under here. Yep, there it is. We're not going to be reusing these dampers or these washers. The only reason that we're doing this is to get our dust boot and our bump stop out. So I just kind of turn these upside down on the concrete or whatever that's hard, and just kind of tap the washer with the hammer until it separates itself from the top pin. So we're going to start assembling our new coilover. We're going to take our new damper with the lock ring that we reused for the lower mount. I like to start at the bottom and work my way up. It really doesn't matter how you do it. It's just the way I prefer to do it. It's the way I was taught to do it. So we'll put the lock ring on first, get it to a decent setting, and then we'll add our lower mount to it, take it to where we're guessing, you know, because we're doing a true coilover conversion, so the ride height's going to change. I wouldn't recommend using the same setting that it was on for the separate spring and shock version. And then we'll get our second damper, add our lock ring and our lower mount, and set it to the same exact height as the first one that we assembled. I've been doing this for quite some time, so I can eyeball these pretty good. I would definitely recommend measuring, but if I measure it, then it really gives a whole new meaning to hand tight racing, and that's not what we're about. But after that's done, you're going to take your spanner wrench and lock the lock rings down. I just like to put it on there, give it a few taps, and it should be tight enough. Check them when you get them on the car, obviously, but this should be good for now. Once those are locked down and not easily moved by hand, so they don't change when you're messing with this, we'll grab our middle lock ring, run that down to a decent setting. Then we'll grab our upper lock ring or our lower spring seat lock ring, run that down to it, take our plastic spring seat isolator so we don't forget that, put that onto the upper lock ring or the lower spring seat lock ring, and then repeat the same for the other damper. Once that's complete, we'll take both bump stops, put them on the piston shaft. If you are doing the conversion without buying bump stops, they may be hard because this is a 14 shaft. They were made for a 12.5 shaft. So just kind of force it on there and then slide both dust boots over the bump stops. Then add your damper washer and your spring. So now we're going to install our upper mount, push it down to where it's flush with the washer on the bottom. Make sure that there's play in the spring like you see there. And then we're going to tighten it down. Once this is tightened down, just double check it, make sure there's still play in the spring, because that's going to play a portion in our preload. Repeat these steps on the opposite side's coilover, and then we will be ready to set our 4mm of spring preload. As you can see here, my lock rings were ran up way too high, so I had to adjust them by hand to get adequate gap to make sure that we have zero preload and some play in the spring before tightening down the upper mount. So what I usually do at this point is turn the coilover upside down so that the spring sits flush with the upper mount, and then I run both the middle and upper lock ring to the spring until there's zero gap between the lock ring, the spring, and the upper mount. So as you can see, I have no play in the spring currently. And then what we're gonna do is take our middle lock ring and run it up to where it's flush with our upper lock ring, and then we will turn the upper lock ring towards the spring until you can fit your spanner wrench between the middle lock ring and the upper lock ring, which is exactly 4mm of preload. Our spanner wrench fits in the gap. That's how we know we have our 4 millimeters of preload. And we're going to catch the middle lock ring up to the upper lock ring and then tighten this thing down. And this one will be done. Repeat these steps on the other coilover, and these things will pretty much be ready for installation. Our spanner wrench fits in the gap, so it's pretty much time to run that middle lock ring up to the upper spring seat lock ring and lock these ones down. All right, so that's going to be it for the true coilover conversion. I mean, I'm sure if you have a Z, you know how to put your coilovers back on. The main focus of that was just to show you how exactly to set up the BCs. That's going to be it for the true rear conversion on the 350Z / G35. I hope this video helped you. If it didn't, well, I'm sorry, but until next time.